Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Are you ready?
Let's get it.
All right, yo. What's up? It's your boy D Starks.
Starks Artist.
You are now tuned in to the Just Different podcast, where we talk everything faith, life, and culture. Let's get into it.
We back
Let's tap
again,
in.
bro.
Yes,
Before
sir.
we get into it, do me a favor real quick. If you haven't already and you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on that post notification bell to see when we post. If you're listening on a podcast app, leave a rating and review for us real quick. We appreciate y'all support always.
Yes, sir. Much love. And, you know, we're going to get straight into this one.
Oh, straight to the action.
We're going to get straight in. We're going to tap in. If you all remember, if you haven't already, you definitely go check this out. But we did an episode in January that was called Your Circle Matters. And in that episode, we talked about the importance of like relationships, your inner circle, and being around people that are going to push you towards your purpose. And the highlight of that was the fact that relationships are kingdom currency, right? So anytime God wants to get anything to you, he's always going to do it through the relationships. It's always going to come in the form of relationship and people he sends to your life. And so that was something that we were both really challenged with the beginning of this year in terms of like making sure we're building that community, being consistent and intentional about like maintaining it, keeping it, and allowing these people to actually help us advance and develop in our purpose, our gifts, and what God's called us to. And so, you know, going into this year, that was a highlight and a goal of mine to make sure I was doing that. And I was being consistent. I was doing that. I was opening up, being vulnerable, and transparent with the people God put in my life. But somewhere along the first 6 months of the year, I found myself going back to some old habits, right? Going back to some old tendencies of wanting to isolate myself. Right, instead of being transparent with y'all, just like go and put it in my journal, talking to God, and like y'all may get it later. You know what I mean? Like I found myself just going back to old patterns of like just this, you know, do it all by myself, from myself, through myself, and not needing other people, even though I had the environment and the inner circle right in front of me.
Exactly.
And then I was just thinking, like, dang, like, am I addicted to independence? Like it. After, you know, so long, years and after just like this extended period of time of me being on my own, being alone and not feeling like I had people I could actually like vent to, that could actually challenge me and sharpen me in what I wanted to do, it's like, dang, like have I become like so addicted to just being by myself, being to myself, and it being what's more comfortable for me. Right, just like, okay, going back, put myself in my own world, in my room, shutting people out, not like being open and transparent. And I just realized, like, dang, like I really have. You know what I mean? Like I'm just so it's been what I've known for so long. It's what I'm most comfortable with. Right. And now I'm just like going back to this instead of using the community that like God has given me. And whenever we went to Holy Smoke, whenever we went to Atlanta for Holy Smoke, before we went there, we stopped in Nashville with our brothers, and shout out Jordan Diggs, man,
the goat.
We were having a conversation about really the power of community, and he had mentioned something about this sermon that he had heard at his church, and the pastor, he was talking about this topic, and he gave this example of this experiment that scientists did on lab rats. And essentially, they had these rats in these containers, and all they had was these bowls of like cocaine water and regular water and food. And essentially, at some point, whenever the rats came in contact with the cocaine water, they got addicted, and that's all they really wanted. That's like their main source of pleasure and their desire. And so they wanted that so bad they wouldn't eat, and eventually they would die off. Right. And so they did a part 2 of this experiment, and eventually in the second part, they put other things in this environment, right? So they still had this bowl of cocaine water, this bowl of regular water, but they put like activities, right? Added different like scenery to it. But more importantly, they added playmates for the rats, right? So different, like a community of rats that they could interact with and be with. And what they found was that although the rat would at times go back to the cocaine water, right, it wouldn't be as frequent at all. Right. Like it wouldn't be as frequent at all, because the rat at that point then had everything it needed, right? So it didn't necessarily desire or have this like intense longing to go to this thing that like obviously was not the best for it. And really the gist of that is the fact that the power of community can even like break addiction and keep you from the things that are not going to like ultimately progress you as an individual to what God is calling you to. And when you're doing all that by yourself, right, when you're in an environment of independence, when you're having to, you know, fight the desires of this world and or like walk by the Spirit of God, it's a lot harder to manage that when you don't have other things around
Most definitely.
you. So yeah, after he told us that reminded me of this podcast that I was listening to, and this man was basically speaking about early human civilization and how in those days people were a lot more closer to their families and communities and inner circle. Essentially, when you think about it, they were living in huts, small villages, and they weren't so concerned about just going off and being on their own, right? So when you think about that compared to today, obviously, 18, you're leaving the house, and then we go into adulthood after graduating, you're ultimately like by yourself, right? Going to the state of like just taking on the world, taking on your dream, your career, really outside of your community, outside of the people that you're closest with, and how that has led to a lot of like even like mental issues when it comes to like depression, anxiety, or the fact that you doing all this alone,
right,
by yourself, right? This need of like, bro, I'm about to get out the house. Like, I'm about to get away from everybody. I'm about to move. I'm about to do this. Like, I'm about to do this by myself. Like, y'all gotta believe in me. I gotta go. I'm gonna go, and which isn't inherently wrong. So like, you know, you obviously be your own person,
right,
and things of that nature, and to take on responsibility. But then to the point to where it's just like me now, just trying to chase what I'm on purpose to do, or just live life genuinely without the assistance of like anyone, or just like pushing people away. And he was talking about the difference between the two, and how like that's just like this mindset of like just go of just all this ambition, and doing it like by ourselves has just like caused a lot of different issues. And then I continue to talk about the fact that I do believe that's one of the biggest like hindrances to community, having an inner circle and building relationships, is this I can do battle by myself mentality. Like this all need no one. Popular loner. We love that one. Bro.
Yeah, we love each other.
The popular loner. It's almost like cool to like be misunderstood.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. It's almost like a pride thing to be like, oh yeah, no one gets me. I don't have an inner circle. I got my circle is small as a period. Like, bro, what? Like, and there's a certain level of pride that comes with us doing everything by ourselves, through ourselves, and from ourselves, with no help from anyone else.
Right.
And the thing is, like, yo, if I have that mindset, I will do all these things for myself, and I can't really possess the heart that will want me to serve other people and to do things for other people, right? And that's what the kingdom is all about. Right. It's literally all about sacrifice. It's all built on relationships and community, because you can't reach your purpose and what God wants you to do in life, or live life genuinely like without it. And in Philippians 2, verses 3-4, it says, do not do anything out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others. And so whenever you get in this mode of like this just like hyper independence, and or like it's all on you, like you won't have a heart to serve people, right? Like it's going to be you really caught up in your own selfish ambitions, and you're not really looking out for the interests of anyone else. Because it's really hard to maintain both, no matter how much you think you actually can.
Yeah. Popular loner. We love saying that, bro. Like, people be like, yeah, man, I'm different. People just don't understand me. Like, we're literally just different. We can be different together, you know? We can be different with other people type of thing. But I digress. Anyway, I think a big part of where this determination to remain independent stems from is an issue of trust. I think that's kind of even with my own personal story. It's like with your old circle or old friend group you had, or old friends, it's kind of like they had let you down at some point, or, you know, you need that shoulder to lean on, and they kind of just weren't there for you. Whatever the case may be, I think a lot of trauma can be left from that. And the natural response for a lot of people is to be like, oh, you know, I'm independent now. Like, and especially when you get this new group of people, it's kind of like you have them, but like you said, you kind of slip back into that old mindset, or that old habits of like being independent. And I think, like I said, the issue of that is like, okay, there's a lot of trauma there that hasn't been dealt with, and you're thinking these new people are going to treat you how the old people did, and people develop this like, you know, I just work better alone type of mentality. I hear that a lot. It's like, do you work better alone, or are you just afraid of getting hurt again? Like, dude, are you really just the solo player one type, or are you just haven't dealt with that trauma from that last thing? You know,
say let him hear that again.
I said,
that's the one.
Do you work better alone, or are you just afraid of getting hurt again? Let's call it what it is. Let's make the main thing. I think if your need for independence originated from an issue of trust, your next step is to forgive.
Yeah,
obviously, you know what I mean. That's something I'm honestly still kind of in the process of doing, because like I said, in some of my past relationships, I felt like people had let me down at some point, or it was really just the way that people responded to how I went to them. And now it's like I'm kind of still afraid to go to my new friend group, my new brothers, because it's like, dang, how are they going to respond? And I still haven't dealt with it. But like the next step is just to forgive those past people, to let go of that trauma and let go of that hurt. And that's that next step.
That's good. And like I kind of briefly touched on earlier, it's just the fact that your independence and this like state of isolation can get so comfortable. You can convince yourself that I don't need a community. Right. That I don't really need anyone. Like I went this long by myself. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we mentioned this in Your Circle Matters, but what got you here, it's not going to get you there.
It can't, bro.
And that's so funny, because I had literally been telling myself the same thing for a while before the beginning of this year. It's the fact that, like, I work better alone. Right. And I was thinking about this the other day, is the fact that I convinced myself that I was like an introvert. Like seriously, like, and you know, those who like who are familiar with me, or at least know me in my inner circle, know that is completely not the case. Like I'm the guy that's gonna go out. I'm the first person to initiate the conversation. Like, hey, yo, like, where you from? How you doing? Yeah. What's your dream goals? X, Y, and Z. And literally in that state of like me doing everything for myself or by myself, like I had like convinced myself that, oh yeah, like I don't even like people like that. I don't even need people. And even in my creative process of like whenever I was like building things or starting things, anything else, it was like, yeah, I just do it better alone. I don't like having too many people. Right. It's not efficient, doesn't work like fast enough. And like the fact is, I was just comfortable where I was at. Right. I didn't want to take on the challenge or the sacrifice to put my pride aside, to humble myself and to allow people into like my process of like whatever I'm working on and or working through in my personal life of like what I'm going through. It's like, I don't really like talking to people. It's better for me to just like write this out. I'll just pray about it. Right. You know what I mean? They may hear a little bit of it, but I got it. But yeah, that's so good, because I found myself in that too. Just like I thought, well, is it really? Do I really work better alone? Right. Which is like which I found, which I have found is completely not the case at all. Right. Like I actually get so much more energy, so much more like perspective, and I'm a lot more creative whenever I'm with people. Right. So every time I even get in that mode, I get around my brothers, I'm like, yo, like breaking down that lie from the enemy, like it's completely false. Right. And along with that, I think it being like, of course, like an issue of trust sometimes, is also an issue of like pride and the lack of humility in some instances, right? Because we just have to get to a point to where breaking down ourselves to admit and acknowledge, yo, I need help. I need help. You know, like because you can't do you genuinely, as much as like we hear it all the time, the cliche, you just can't do it by yourself. Like there's no such thing. And in Proverbs 11:2, it says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. And another scripture I wanted to highlight was Proverbs 26:12, and it says, do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than him. And it's because this desire to be completely on my own comes with like this arrogant assumption that I have all the answers. Right? You may not say that, you may not think that, but that is what you are portraying in your actions, that you have all the answers, the resources, and abilities to accomplish what God has tasked you to do. Exactly. That, oh, I can do this by myself. God's dream he has for me, well, that it's only going to take me. And come from myself, right? Because like those verses we're mentioning, like with pride, with pride, there can be no wisdom, there can be no destruction, there can be no next steps, because that
Right.
can only come from when there's humility involved, of me making the submission of, oh, I need more knowledge on this.
Yep.
I need more information. I need more help in this area. Yo, I need to heal through this, and I need someone to talk to. I need to get through that past mistake. Oh, this shame right here, right? But it's gonna come from me like putting like myself aside to like actually get this instruction that I need. And then at that point, there's actually hope for me, right? And then that Proverbs 26:12, it talks about there's more hope than a fool, than the person who sees they're wise in their own eyes, because there can be no hope or instruction given there. And I remember I was Pastor Keon Henderson. He had said something along the lines of like, the smartest person in the world isn't the one who has a book full of answers. It's the person who has a book full of questions. Why? Because you never give an answer to a person who already has one.
Say it again.
You feel me?
Oh, say it again, bro.
What? No.
That was such a bar.
The smartest person in the world isn't the one who has a book full of answers. It's the man who has a book full of questions. Because you never give an answer to a man who already has one, right? So the key is humility, right? The key is to seek out the help, right? To ask the question, to ask for the assistance, to ask for whatever it is, in order to like making sure you're utilizing your community and not just staying completely tied to like this independence of I can do it by myself, or I like, mode of isolation.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely, for sure, that's a bar, because it's definitely a pride thing. I remember, so I used to play basketball, right? And there was this guy on my team, and he was so determined to go out there every single game and just like win it on his own. You know what I mean? Like, and he no, like for real, bro. Like, he was like ball hug and never passed the ball.
I thought he was LeBron.
And he for real thought he was him. Like, he thought he was so good at the game that he didn't need anyone else's help. In fact, I think he found like satisfaction when like we would win a game and it was like kind of like he had like the most points, or like he was like going crazy or whatever. But Darin can attest to this. We didn't win any tournaments, bro. For real, like we never won any tournaments.
Y'all was cheeks.
No, we were, bro. It was because like when you're going up against other players who understand the importance of a team and of that dependence, you'll never win. You know what I mean? And I think life in general, like it was never meant to be like just a solo player type of thing. So it's like when you're just kind of trying to go at life alone, when you're getting attacked by all these other things, it's like, okay, you can't win that. Because, like, when you're going up independently against people who are depending on each other, like, you're going to lose. And that's just, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's bound to happen. So I think it's like you said, it's just that humility piece and understanding, like, I really can't do this alone. And there's no weakness in that. I think somehow the world has convinced us, like, oh, I'm weak if I need help. Or asking for help is a sign of weakness, when it isn't. It's a sign of, honestly, it's a sign of strength, that humility. And that vulnerability is kind of what we talked on in Clarissa's episode, but it's actually a sign of strength, admitting that you do need that help. So yeah, I think it's really just humility and understanding that there's a need for it. And even deeper than that, I think this issue of wanting and this desire for independence even bleeds into our relationship with God, because our whole dynamic and relationship with Him is one of dependence, like us depending on His love, His patience, like His glory, His anointing. So if you're someone who's so hell-bent on being independent and not relying on anyone, you're prohibiting God from truly moving to, you know what I mean, that fullest extent in your life. But I think there also has to be a measure of independence. Like, it's a balance, which, I mean, if you've been listening to the podcast, it's something you've heard before. It's something you're going to hear again, because it's always a balance with everything. I think there has to be a balance between independence and dependence, because I mean, you see it a lot. You see people who have become so dependent that they can't really do anything on their own. And then, like, you know what I mean? When they have to face something, it's kind of like they buckle under it. And then you have people who are so independent that they don't go to people for help. And even in that relationship with God, there has to be a measure of independence in the way that, yes, you are depending on Him for so many things, but He's also depending. Well, I don't want to use the word depending, because quite honestly, He doesn't need you. He desires to have your cooperation. He doesn't need you, but He's depending on you in the way that, although you're depending on Him for certain things, He also needs you to put some work in on your own. You know what I mean? Like, you still have to manage what He's created. So in that way, there has to be a balance in your life between that independence and that dependence.
No, yeah, one of our favorites, John 15:5, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And so our relationship with God is based upon dependence. As Jordan was saying, I mean, you can't do anything without Him. Love without Him. walk out purpose without him, have power without him, peace, whatever that is, fill in the blank. It has to be a relationship of humility to set our pride aside and ultimately and seek his spirit to help us walk through whatever we're facing in a moment. Yeah, and then what I've talked about before is it all correlates, because how I'm interacting with people is going to directly affect how I'm living out my relationship with God. And so if I can't be open with my inner circle, people who's placed into my life, and what's right in front of me, how do I expect to do that with God? Right. And if I can't be open, transparent, vulnerable, or at least ask for help from God, how do I expect to do that with other people? And so it's a holistic thing of living this out on every level with every relationship that we have, in terms of asking for assistance and not wanting to just go out, do our own thing and think it can be all us or nothing.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and something else I wanted to add is I think a lot of people just feel the need to always be in control of everything, right? And I was watching a TikTok, and they were just talking about how, like, as people, so many of our problems originate from the fact that we want to control things that we simply can't. And I think that's why a lot of us always feel so burdened and are always, like, so tired all the time, is because we want to have control of everything. A lot of us have an obsession for it. But the problem with that is like there's a lot of pressure there when it's like when everything is on you, and you know what I mean? It's all on your back, and all that weight is under your, like, and all that weight is what you're carrying. There's a lot of pressure there. And kind of even going back to that analogy about my basketball team earlier, it's like there's subs in basketball for a reason. It's because, like, when you're out there on that court, like, it gets tiring. Like, when you're the one making the plays, when you're the one having to score, when you're the one having to keep the other team from scoring, whatever that looks like, that's very tiring. That's why there's subs, so people can come in and people can help you out. But, like, I think a lot of us are just playing the game the whole, you know what I mean? We're playing the whole 4 quarters with no subs, and it's like, yo, there's a lot of pressure there. And sometimes you have to let go of that control. Hey, come sub in for me. You know what I mean? Like, you take over, and we have to be willing to sometimes just, like, submit that control to other people. You know what I mean? Not always feel like we have to have control of 100% of everything.
Yeah, that's good. So how do you do that? Right. In terms of letting go of that control, not even or just broader in terms of that assistance, right? Getting to the point of asking people for help and breaking down whatever has happened to you or where you're at now in terms of wanting to just do it by myself, and what does that look like in terms of actually stepping out, like, you know what? Let me go ahead and ask for help. Let me ask for this real quick.
So really, you can't really judge the waters without testing them first. I think what it was like for me in my situation was I was judging how I was hurt from my past experiences, and, like, automatically just assuming that's how my new friend group was going to respond in that exact same way. And I feel like that really isn't fair, and it's kind of counterintuitive, because you never really know until you try it, type of thing. So for me, and something that's helped me get over that is, like, actually taking that leap and, like, okay, let me see if I can trust them with this. And then once I realized, like, hey, like, okay, they didn't actually respond like they did. Like, oh, they were actually there for me when I called them. They actually picked up the phone. So it's like, yeah, that's something I say, like, that's something that I think will help, is just actually trying it out, because a lot of us get so caught up in the fear of it without even actually trying it out. So yeah.
No, yeah, and then we talked about this in our episode we did talking about vulnerability with Clarissa, but using your discernment, right? You talk about, Jordan's talking about, quote unquote, like, testing waters and that nature. Well, you don't even need to necessarily, like, do that. Like, God's going to give you the provision and that insight to know, like, who is and who's not for you. And so you can honestly just, like, seek God and trust him, right? And trust that, he's put the right people into my life, the inner circle that he's placed to help me and assist me are going to do just that. And not always going off your own judgment, because we know that can be flawed at times, and just trusting the Spirit and him guiding you, going in the right direction and adding the right people to your life, and asking, okay, like, like, what's the spirit behind this person, right? Is it someone who's just trying to leech off of me what you're trying to do in my life, and or actually propel me to the next stage you're trying to take me where you want me to go? So definitely, like, discernment is one of the big things in that, in terms of like just breaking down that like I gotta do it by myself, and actually adding assistance around you. And from there, that gives you more of like a security. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to like necessarily get hurt or get burned at times, right? God says that offenses will come, right? That's just the nature of like humanity. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, yo, if you ask for assistance or help and that person had a shortcoming or failed in some area, doesn't mean they actually weren't sent by God, right? Because how many times have like you been in a position of like a divine connection or in a relationship and still fell short and failed? And so I think we also have to keep that in mind too.
And I kind of just want to give some advice on it, because we were also talking about pride earlier and like how to humble yourself. And I think something that helped me with that is just realizing, like, because someone could tell you that, but you're like, okay, how do I know I can't do it on my own? I think your lack of progress is a main indicator of the fact that you can't do it on your own. Like you've been depressed for years. Like you're still struggling with that thing. You've been struggling with it for years. Obviously something has to change. You know what I mean? Like it has to be something. And we're just proposing that something is that you're doing it in your own strength. You're doing it on your own. And that's just not, it's not going to work out. So yeah, I think that's always a main indicator that it's like, you're never going to be able to do it on your own.
No, yeah, it comes full circle, right? What got you here won't get you there
At all.
It won't. And so, yeah, you got anything else?
No, I think I said, you know what I'm saying?
You got it off your chest.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
But no, yeah, don't stay comfortable in your isolation, in the state of independence that rejects assistance and what God's trying to send to you, or what's going to propel you to what's next. Set your pride aside and be humble.
Sit down.
So yeah, whatever it takes to do that, in terms of what Jordan mentioned earlier, forgiving what has happened, forgiving people in your past, healing from what has happened, or just setting your pride aside and being humble. But y'all know what it is. Stay you,
Stay real,
and stay humble. We'll catch y'all next week. Much love.